All right, this is block 4 over there. Section 5 of Treaty of Versailles, the section beginning the aims of the Allies and the U.S. at the Versailles Conference. Wilson goes to Paris to where the treaty was going to be written. And the treaty is negotiated in the most beautiful building in Europe, the Palace of Versailles, where the French kings and queens used to live. Wilson does not go at the head of a united delegation. Wilson goes simply as one of 4 leaders, all who wanted different things out of this peace treaty. Let's start with the delegation itself. Let's talk about their aims. Wilson's aims we know. Wilson wanted the 14 points. He wanted a progressive world dominated by these 14 points and ruled over by this League of Nations, by this body that promised collective security for everybody. That is not what the other 3 men want. Wilson is viewed by these other 3 men as kind of a silly ideologue that has no idea how diplomacy and European politics work. Wilson is going up against 3 other Allied leaders, and let's take them in turn. Here, all the way on the left, is Vittorio Orlando. He was the premier of Italy, and his goal was to increase Italian territory at the expense of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. The Prime Minister of Great Britain at the time was a Welshman by the name of David Lloyd George, the great commoner. He was a Labour Party Prime Minister, and David Lloyd George's goal at this treaty is to ensure the continued survival and prosperity of the British Empire. Georges Clemenceau, who's seated next to President Wilson here, is the French premier. And he is after something very simple. Clemenceau wants to punish Germany and make 100% certain that Germany can never do to France again what Germany had done to France during the war. He wants to punish Germany territorially, he wants to punish Germany morally, and he wants to punish Germany financially. And Clemenceau and David Lloyd George and Orlando look at Wilson and his 14 points and say, you have no idea what you are talking about. You are some American president, you have never dealt with European politics and European realities. It was so nice of you to come into the war at the very, very end and help us win the war, but your ideas to win the peace are kind of ridiculous, they say to President Wilson. They call him naive. They make fun of the fact that he was a professor. David Lloyd George was a labor union leader in the mines. Georges Clemenceau was a farmer, and then he went to school, but they think Wilson is terribly, terribly naive. And you know what? To a very large degree, President Wilson is terribly, terribly naive. So let's take a look back at those 14 points and see what happened to them. There is no way that Great Britain is going to go for freedom of the seas. They are dependent on the ability of their navy to maintain their empire. The British are not going to go for free trade. They have what's called imperial preference, where if you're in the British Empire, you benefit from trade with Great Britain. The French are never going to let their army get to such a small size that it can't defend themselves from Germany. They're going to argue for German reduction of armaments, but the French army is going to stay powerful and strong. Obviously, none of these countries is going to be in favor of colonial self-determination. They all have these enormous colonial empires. At the very outset, President Wilson is facing this incredible uphill battle to get any of his 14 points across. And he's going to have to compromise on every single one of them until he reaches the 14th point itself, his League of Nations. As we said before, this League of Nations is Wilson's baby. He loves it. He, in fact, as the treaty goes on, gives up all of his other points to get a League of Nations in the peace treaty. And what did this League of Nations provide for? This League of Nations provided for what's known as, now, the League of Nations was Article 10 of the Versailles Treaty. So when the treaty was actually written, Wilson does get his League of Nations. It's Article 10 in the treaty. So if you see on a test, Article 10 of the Versailles Treaty, Article 10 is the League of Nations. And the League of Nations is based off of a very simple idea called collective security. All collective security means, can I have some volunteers from the audience? I need some volunteers from the audience. Come on up here, audience. There's one other person in the audience. What is collective security? Collective security, stand right next to it. Collective security is very simple. If a country goes to war with Ryan, what does that mean? That means Maura goes to war with the country that attacks Ryan. If I attack Ryan, automatically Maura goes to war with me. Likewise, if I go to war with Maura, Ryan steps in on her behalf and goes to war against me. Thank you very much, audience volunteers. Collective security means war on one equals war on all. And the idea behind it is that no one will go to war knowing that if you attack one country, you are in effect going to war with all of the countries in the United Nations. This is Wilson's grand idea, that if we can all agree to promise to support each other, if anyone attacks us, then no one will attack us because no one wants to go to war with all of us. That is collective security. That is the heart of the League of Nations, the 10th article of the Treaty of Versailles.